welcome everyone. Happy Thursday. I don't know if people say happy Thursday, but I seem to say happy whatever day of the week it is. So I apologize. I apologize. Today we are here together for 30 minutes to have a very casual and honest conversation about the great resignation and the great reshuffle and how managers can really help play a role and what practices they can implement today to help mitigate some of the outcomes of that. I am joined today by Rob. Hi, Rob. Thanks for joining us. Rob is a high performance leadership coach. He specializes in building high impact leaders who turn their teams into happy, high performers that achieve their goals. Rob has several certifications. He's a fearless organization practitioner, a predictive index talent consultant, a dare to lead facilitator, and an elite high performance leadership coach. Rob, did I get all of them?
That's enough. Thanks for having me,
Perfect.
Sammy.
No,
It's
sure. It just really highlights why you're here today and why you're very qualified to have this conversation with us. So, to kick things off, I think we can all agree that there are good managers, there are great managers, and then unfortunately, there are managers that make employees want to quit their jobs. And in a recent 10 spot survey that we released, we learned that 46%, bless you, of all workers that say that they currently have a manager or a team lead who makes them want to quit their job. So that's not really great news for companies that are really struggling with retention. So that's kind of the management side. And then we start layering in the fact, excuse me, that this is remote leadership and remote management. And additionally, we also learned from the survey data that 61% of workers are concerned that both their career advancement opportunities and their earning potential are in jeopardy as a result of the remote relationship they have with their manager. So, two really important things that we want to discuss. So, Rob, to kind of dive in, let's go really broad first. What are some of the best practices that managers should do when leading remotely?
I mean the first thing, Sammy, is we all need to just acknowledge that this is an unprecedented event, right? And
Mm,
now that we've acknowledged that, now we have to take steps forward. And I think it's been, 2 years since we've been in offices. And as leaders, not only do we need to like dive into it because we're seeing record quit rates still, like the BLS reported, I think it was 12.5 million Americans quit their job in the last 3 months, I want to say. And so this is the highest on record since they started tracking voluntary quit rates in the year 2000. So people are quitting their jobs, and some percentage of them, actually, some I saw up to 80% to the workforce because they're with the organizations that are practices that are out there. So that's the first thing. Now, for me, in terms of best practices, it's all about building trust and relationships and connection with your people. And obviously,
mm,
trust starts with this foundation. And there's a lot of science on trust, but basically, it's the perception that the people have on you, and we'll use the Charles Feltman version of trust, but he says basically the four pillars of trust are care, reliability, sincerity, and competence. And it's not whether or not I am actually that, it's whether you judge me as that. And that's where you will decide whether or not to
mm,
trust me. And so the big one there is care, right? And that's where, frequent touch points matter. Totally use video over just audio or over something like a Slack or a text message, you know, making sure that you're talking about stuff like Love is Blind or what TV show you're watching or their kids or their soccer game or their new dog or whatever. You can see mine in the back. um,
mm,
right? Like these are things where we can build trust. We're building relationships, but we're building trust. And that's where you can open space for conversations about struggle. And one of my favorite quotes from Gabor Mate, who's a world-renowned expert in trauma and addictions, he says, safety is not the lack of risk, it's the presence of connection. And that's where I teach my leaders is start with connection, and then that's going to build these foundations of trust and psychological safety. And that's where you can truly become a high performance team.
Right. And I think that's interesting. You know, we get all of these mixed messages sometimes when it's, you mentioned connecting with people via video versus, you know, just sending a Slack or sending an email. Then we get all of this data that there's Zoom fatigue and that there's, you know, all of these other issues that are taking place when one is using all of the technology that we've been using throughout the pandemic. But you're so right. Forming it, it just helps when we have our video on, even now, Rob. I can see you talk passionately about something. I can see you use your hands and gesticulate when you're excited about something. And it creates just a deeper level of kind of connection and understanding, making sure that I'm interpreting what you're saying, you know, on a deeper level more effectively.
And it's right. And it's like 90% or whatever of communication is nonverbal, right? And we
Sure.
know that, and we can sense and see reactions, and we can sense and see people. And if we're just sending an email, like how often have we gotten an email from somebody and we're like, oh, they must be really mad at us. And then you call them
Yes.
and they're like, what? Like I was just like, where's your piece of the project? Like it made no anything. And so it just, the
Sure.
video allows you to just see them, connect with them, and then the dogs walking in the background or the kids, or and it just brings people a step closer.
Mm. Brings that humility back to the conversation that I feel like at times even I am guilty of that. I lost a bit, wanted to get right into work, discuss what's happening today at work, and forgetting about those icebreakers and those personal conversations. It's really important. So, on that note, we talked a little bit about trust and what's required to kind of build that trust. Let's dive a little bit more into how to build and foster those relationships with employees and colleagues remotely. What tips do you have?
My favorite exercise in building trust is having someone ask for help.
Mm.
It's because it forces us to be vulnerable enough to ask for what we need. And actually, the person that we ask help from, it creates an incredible amount of trust with them, because they feel, well, one is they feel that you see their abilities, but two is also that you were vulnerable enough to trust them. And that's where I would say everybody can do it today, whether it's with your partner, your mom, your dad, someone you work with, your boss, your subordinate, whatever. It's ask for help in an area that you need. It could be something small, it could be something big. It doesn't matter. You can do it today.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I I really resonate with that because we have a smaller team here at 10 Spot and it's really all hands on deck at all times. But there are moments where I'm like, it's not nervous or afraid to ask for help, but it's a little bit more like, I don't want to bother them. I want to take the burden off of them. But when you frame it that way, it forms a deeper connection with my colleagues and says, hey, I'm asking you for this because I need it. And it's also presenting an opportunity to connect.
And as a
So I
leader,
appreciate you reframing that.
yeah, also as a leader, you're demonstrating and
Mm.
walking the walk of what you're asking them to do. And for
Mhm.
us as leaders, we need to be wholly authentic, because there's nothing worse. And I've worked in companies where it was this way. Like I worked in mining, and every company in mining, there's the value on the wall says safety is number one, because we don't want to hurt people
Right.
and it's dangerous industry. And yet you'd go into a thing and you'd say, hey, we need to spend $1 million to make this safer, or we can spend $1 million and we'll produce, 10 million more worth of stuff a year. Every time they pick production. And you're sitting there going like, well, what about, your website says safety number one, it says on the wall, and it's like that destroys trust in an instant. And there's a Dutch proverb that says, trust arrives on foot and leaves on horseback. And that's what you have to be as a leader. You have to be authentically you and authentic to what you say and practice what you preach, because not only will that build trust, but it's also like the only way people will follow you.
Mm. Yeah. And for those of you tuning into this conversation, we also would love to know, feel free to throw this into the chat or unmute yourself if you want to join in the dialogue. What have you done to build relationships, or what techniques or things have you tried out to help build and foster relationships, specifically with distributed teams? We'd love to hear your feedback or any questions that you have as well. Feel free to throw them into the chat as we continue the conversation. So I don't know if everyone who is tuning in has been a manager for years or is freshly a new manager. We've spoken to a ton of individuals that were promoted throughout the pandemic, and while they say it's really exciting that their career is advancing and they feel that they're acquiring these new skills, there's also been this like, oh no moment. I've never really led or managed teams in the in an office. Now I'm expected to lead and manage teams remotely, and there really isn't a lot of training on that. So Rob, do you have any insights on, like, if you're a new manager, where should you start? What are some of the first things that you should do?
Totally. Absolutely. The first thing I would do, and this is another element of connection, is be vulnerable. Now, it's easy to say that, and what does that truly mean? But typically, what I start off with is just telling your people your story about you. And when I say that, I don't mean, hey, I was at this job. Hey, I was at this job. I went to this college. But who are you really? Like, like, hey, I watched Love Is Blind on TV. Ha ha. Like, I love, I bought a dog last year because, it was in the middle of the pandemic and I needed someone to like be there for me. Like for me, I can say, hey, like, it's not all about, I value like deep connections. I value having conversations like these. I value being somebody that helps other people. Like these are things that you can open up with and talk a little bit about your values and your story and who you are. And it's not like, hey, like, crazy vulnerability, but it opens the door for connection with others. And then it's just about, these small moments like feedback, like give feedback and get feedback as much as you can. Foster that. When someone says to you, hey, Rob, you could have articulated this better, or, you came off a little angry today. I really appreciate you bringing that with me, and then demonstrate how you're going to fix that going forward. Right. And if you can take that and also show the team, like, let's say that feedback was one-on-one. You say, hey, you go to the team, you go, hey, so-and-so said to me, or you don't even have to name the person, but I got this feedback that, I was angry at this meeting, that was totally on me. And I want you to call me out on it next time, like immediately. Right? Like this stuff is paramount. And to be honest, it doesn't really exist that often. Not too many leaders do this because it's scary and it's vulnerable, and it requires you being comfortable enough in yourself that it's not an attack on yourself. And that's the true work.
Yeah.
If you want my true advice, is lean inward before you lean outward.
Yeah, I'm going to pause for a second and let that sink in. That's really wonderful advice. Rob, something that we've done here at TenSpot and that a lot of our customers have been implementing as well is something we call the user guide. And if any of you have tuned into any of my conversations previously, you'll know that I'm kind of obsessed with user guides. But it asks individuals a series of questions about themselves. It's like the getting to know you part. How do you like to receive feedback? What time of day do you like to work? What's your favorite TV show or pizza topping or cookie flavor? And it's really important. It's in written form, and so some people that might not want to speak about it at all times might feel a little bit more confident writing about it, and then you share that with other individuals, and it just gives you enough information to break the ice, to form a stronger connection, to comment on someone's user guide and be like, choc chip is my favorite too, I hate oatmeal raisin, and it just forms a little bit of a deeper connection. So we've found user guides to kind of be that entry point for a little bit more vulnerability and communication.
I love it. I love it. And it's one of the companies I consult for. They do pup dates. So
So cute.
every once a week they all take pictures of the puppies and it goes in Slack. It's a good one. And actually Marianne jumped into the chat here and she
Hmm.
said, how do I build relationships as an introvert?
Mm,
And what I would say to this is it's very much one I would lean into it one on one. And
mm,
a lot of introverts, they like to go deep. Like I think I am an introvert, I suppose, but a lot of us we like to go deep in conversation and keep it one on one and do it just lean into it. And it's going to be it may feel uncomfortable, but it's like as you build the relationship, it's just going to become, it's going to be easy. And
mm.
that's, once you have your team all set up, it's just a high performing rocking team. So that's what you truly want, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, we're nearly at the 10-minute before we wrap up mark. So, if you have any questions or insights to what we've been discussing, feel free to throw them into the chat or unmute yourself and join in on the conversation. But I kind of want to flip with this last question, Rob. I want to flip it over to companies that are considering investing in, leadership management or leadership training. What should they be looking for, or what criteria makes it effective for leaders?
Yeah. So there's an article in the Harvard Business Review that talks
Mm,
about leadership training. And they say that Brandon Hall Group ran a study and $356 billion is spent on leadership training every year, which is an incredible amount of money. And
yeah.
yet 75% of that money is going out the door as waste
Mm,
because the leadership training doesn't address the mindsets of the leaders. And so when I said lean inwards before you lean outwards, not only is that my personal belief because I did it and I've done it and I've seen the impact that it had on me, but also that it's backed by this research, right?
mm,
Is and I liken it to this 95 to 90 70% of your decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis come from your subconscious beliefs about yourself and how you interact with the world and who you are and what you're supposed to say and do and all these things. And
mm.
those beliefs, the vast majority of them were formed between when you were born and 7 years old. And so a child is governing your actions today as for you, Sammy, a
Yeah,
founder and a CEO,
yeah,
right? And some of those beliefs that we have about ourselves are not supporting us in where we need to go. And so doing the
right.
mindset work allows us to change the rules of the software in our head and align those 95 to 97% decisions to who we want to become when we're 100 years old and we're looking back at our life going, hey, I really made an impact and I really feel good about the lives I touched.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple of conversations happening in the chat right now that I want to bring to your attention, Rob. And the first one is raised by Brittany, who states that if you're not necessarily a manager, but more of an informal manager, managing peers on various long-term projects, difficult for me sometimes to feel like a leader for them. And other individuals are really resonating and sharing that sentiment. What do you think?
So I love this Simon Sinek quote where he says, leadership is not a rank, it's a choice. And that's where I see it's not about leadership is not the command control stuff anymore. We did that.
Mm,
We went through that. It was developed in, the early 1900s where it was all about efficiency and basically a production line. Now we're in a world where
mm,
this and innovation and creativity is where the really value creation comes from. And so we need to foster psychologically safe environments and trust so then we can get our people to not only feel like they belong, but also that they can give and share ideas without this fear that we have of rejection or being fired or losing our income or whatever that is. And that
mm.
all starts with the groundwork of trust and like psychological safety and leaning into relationships and building connection. And that doesn't have anything to do like that can be with your partner at home, right? Like it doesn't have anything to do with like management. But like in terms of like how do you actually get people hold people accountable and like those types of things for deliverables when you don't have positional authority, a lot of that's going to be making sure that the project has a why, that these and that's going to be different for you than it is for me. Even if we're working on the same thing, it could be different, right? And so speaking to the what's in it for them or what's their why on this project, like, is it a growth opportunity for them? Is it a direction that they want to go in? Is it going to help them on their career? Like, whatever that is, that's where you have to go.
Mm. Brittany, Sarah, and Veronica, if we scratched that itch in that question, let us know if there's a segment or an area that you want to dive a little bit deeper into in the next 5 minutes. Feel free to throw that into the chat and we'll keep the conversation. I think there's a couple of really interesting comments in the chat that I want to address. This domino effect of leadership training. And there's a comment in here that leaders should train other leaders. So it's kind of that giving back. And, now that I've been in the chair leading remote teams for 2 years, I'm sharing my wisdom and passing it on to the next fleet of, managers. I think that's a fantastic idea. And I would love to know if there's companies or individuals tuning in today that have that set up today at their existing company where leaders are training other leaders. Rob, what do you think of that initiative?
I love it, and it's funny. We ran a program with high performers at one tech company, and one of the feedbacks was like, "I wish my management had done this training." And so I think it does start at the top, but it also filters down to the whole organization. Like if you're not doing the top, then the problem is like maybe the CEO or the executives are misaligned with what's happening under in middle management, which it's gonna kill a lot of the growth and even some of those people how they feel about it. And so it's really important to have like an aligned mission and aligned company and really like yeah filtering this out. And it's funny because it's roughly 2/3 of first time managers fail at their position within the first 2 years, and
Mm,
1/3 of them get some sort of mentorship or training. Or so it's like the one like basically it matches, right? If you're getting mentorship or training, you're able to learn what you need to do instead of just being like, hey, I'm the best sales guy, therefore I'm the sales manager now. Well, it's two different skill sets.
yeah. Absolutely. And our chat is continuing to get great conversations going. Claudia has shared some insights and questions to ask, as well as Lucio. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But thank you for adding all of your commentary in there, guys. There's some really great insights in the chat too. If you guys want to flip over and take a look at a couple of those, give it a scroll or two.
Lucio is one of my great leaders in the chat, and I'll share an
Oh,
exercise that actually
amazing.
Lucio did. So Lucio's out of Italy, and you mentioned
Great.
pizza toppings. So Lucio did with his
Yes.
team. He had a and his team's virtual as well, and he had
Mhm.
a virtual pizza class where he taught his team how to make pizza. So it was an incredible exercise that he did that, builds a ton of connection, and it's fun, and it's a great activity. So shout out to Lucio.
Yeah, Lucio, if you're opening that up to anyone outside of your team, I would have joined in toot sweet. Guys, we have about 3 minutes left with Rob. I know we started a couple minutes after the half hour to make sure that we could get everyone in on time, but I do respect that some people might have a hard stop here. We would love to answer any other additional questions that you might have in regards to management or leadership. Feel free to throw those in the chat. Rob has also left his email address in the chat. If you guys want to take hold of that for any additional questions, I'll also throw mine in there too, if anything comes to mind. But yeah, let us know. This is a really, it's a fantastic conversation, but I also feel the frustration with a lot of remote leaders and managers that I speak with today, Rob. And they're looking or trying to grasp at anything, insights that they can do, practices that they can implement. And I really hope that this shed a little bit more light on things that you can do today to make a difference. And yeah. Anyone have any other additional questions before we wrap things up for today? I'm just going to scroll through the chat.
I,
Yeah, sure, Veronica.
I would say absolutely is if they're feeling frustrated and they're not sure what to do. I mean, first
Mhm.
is reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation, but it's also just like what is triggering that?
Mhm.
What is the belief, or why do they feel like it's not being effective? Like what are they missing? And start
Mhm.
digging down into these aspects, because often what I've seen is it's the leaders that feel like they need to be on top of their people at all times, that are frustrated that they can't see, I can't see what Sammy's doing in half an hour. Like, oh my God, what if she's, playing with her dog and not working? Like, you know what I mean? Like
Sure.
but if it's something like that, then maybe it's just you need to lean into yourself and understand better your mindset around leadership. Or if it's like truly something where it's like, you know, Rob's not performing, and how do I help him be a
Mm.
better performer? What does he need? Then that's a discussion that you need to have with Rob or me, I suppose, right? And that's where you need to open up that space for me to tell you what I need to be effective. So
Mm.
there's a lot there, but absolutely it's leaning into, what's going on and how do you solve that?
Yeah, that's a really important point, and I guess it's a perfect time to wrap up with that thought. If you are feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, get to the bottom of that. Is it your approach or your expectations, or is it what you're trying to get from the team, your colleagues and peers? I think kind of separating that will help you move forward and identify, where you want to dive into. On that note, right at time. We got a wonderful tidbit from Ziad. Thank you so much, as well as Lucio. 15 minutes weekly meeting between managers and employees can make a big difference. Compassionate leaders check on mental wellness. How was the week? What were your highs and lows? What can we do? What can we do for each other next week to make things a little bit easier? I love these questions, and they're such a great way to begin those one-on-ones. I think we can all agree there are times where you tune into a one-on-one and you're like going through the checklist of things that you want to cover, and these questions just spark a different conversation and form a different relationship. So Thank you for sharing those. Let's make sure we grab a lot of the chatter that's been taking place today. Rob, I really think that we've had some fantastic insights from individuals. We'll make sure that everyone that's tuning in, this is recorded. We'll make sure that you get a copy of this as well as the questions and tidbits that we got from all of the participants today. So thank you. Rob, thanks for joining us this afternoon. It means a lot. I really appreciate your insights.
Thanks for having me, Sammy. And it's just on that note from Ziad. It's
Mm,
if you truly hear and see your people, not only will you reduce their mental strain or their potential for burnout, but you'll also increase their willingness to stay with you as a leader and their performance.
mm,
And it's an incredible skill to develop, but it will unlock so much in yourself and others.
absolutely. Rob, thank you again. We appreciate it. Thank you everyone for tuning in. You'll be getting an email shortly with all of this information. Enjoy the rest of your week and have a fantastic weekend. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.